Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Muslima Jahan from North South University, and today I have some students, MBA students, also from North South University here. Let me introduce Mukta Akhtar, Esha Mahmood, and Tahmiz Aziz Choudhury. And the viewers, as you see, we are going to discuss about the trade theories, especially three special theories, trade theories, and based on the pandemic situation, we will try to find out some new theories how to deal with trade to make benefit for the society, for the economy, and for the government. Well, so we know what is trade. Trade is actually buying and selling. And when it is international, we do export and import. So governments may interrupt. Governments uh, may impose restrictions, may promote the situation, or may promote something for substitute import. So there are many theories for international trade. So here, let us start from mercantilism, and here I'm inviting Mukta Akhtar to say something about the mercantilism theory, the protectionism theory. Mukta Akhtar.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So, under the mercantilism theory, the practice of the countries are involve government to monitor and regulate the nations in that are involved in the trade with an intention to basically protect their domestic industries. So the main approach is protectionism. Protection in a way by increasing export and decreasing import. So, in our research about mercantilism, we have found in encyclopedia that the dominism of this protectionism theory was during the 16th to 18th century, mainly in Europe, which was even before the Industrial Revolution. So, from the timeline, we can already say this theory is quite backdated. Also, this approach is also one of the zero-sum approach, means own benefit at the expense of others. So we can see in the present globalization era, when all the countries are more focused of building a good relationship with each other, diplomatically handle the trade, in case if the countries identify one country to be playing a zero-sum game, there is a high possibility they may stay isolated from the globalization system. So in a situation, in a crisis like pandemic where shared information, shared knowledge is very important, they may not get their fair share of the information. Also, when a country only focuses on production, they can produce a lot, but when the whole world is going under a lockdown, they will not be able to export their product. So that is one barrier from the forward linkage. Also, the mercantilist countries have a tendency to stock up gold and silver. It is more like stocking up oil these days. Like you can, like we can see the oil prices are going down so much. Even they're facing some minus value in the prices right now. So at crisis like this and global crisis like this, the expensive materials are not that important, but what matters is having food supply, having a proper food supply chain within the country. So there are some of the drawbacks we have in mercantilism theory. But yeah, we will discuss some suggestions in our next discussion, hopefully. Thank you.
Well, we know something about the mercantilism, the protectionism economies when the government encourages more export, more selling, and discourages import. So less buying, less purchase, less import from abroad. Well, based on the competitive advantage theory of Porter's, we know about the diamond model of Porter's. It says that the one factor is the production. When a country, a locality, a region has enormous supply of the production factors, namely land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and very recently added energy. So if the locality, the industry has enormous sources of the production factor, they can focus on some specialized products or services. And from this situation, there is another theory we find that is absolute advantage. So now I'm inviting Isha Mahmood to say something about this absolute advantage. Isha Mahmood.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. So now I'm going to talk about the trade theory of absolute advantage. So this concept of absolute advantage is generally described by the one of the most famous economists, Adam Smith, during the year 1776 on one of his publications named The Wealth of Nations, in which wanted to argue that it was impossible for all nations to become rich simultaneously by following mercantilism, because the export of one nation is another nation's import. So instead of that, all nations can be gained simultaneously if they practice free trade and specialize in accordance with absolute advantage. So that's how this theory is being developed, and it describes that when an economy with an absolute advantage can produce goods or services at a lower cost by using a smaller number of inputs uh, at a or more efficient process than other economies. And also, in this era of globalization, many countries have been followed this theory, and they are being um, getting the advantages from by using this using this theory. So, but in these situations, in these current situations, the functions of absolute advantage becoming obsolete and facing lots of criticisms. So one of the criticisms of there are many reasons of criticism. So one of the reason is we all know, due to the globalization, one country is fully responsible of producing uh, goods, while other country producing fully responsible on another good. So in this critical situation, we all know all the borders are being in lockdown. Uh, it is very difficult for the country to get the goods that they are not producing from. They are not producing solely. So many countries' commodity markets are in huge crisis. And another reasons of this criticism, so as you all know, the production of foods depends on the land, labor, and capital. So currently, because of the outbreak of the coronavirus, so many countries are sending back their foreign laborers because all the productions are in halt. They can't able to do the production right now. So they are sending back the laborers, and the countries those are getting back the laborers. Their remittances are falling very hugely, and the GDP also falling very hugely. So we can say that the dependency creating huge crisis of commodity market and the huge job loss and the collapse of market mechanism. So that's all about the absolute advantage. So, ma'am.
Well, thank you, Esha Mahmood. Actually, this comparative absolute advantage is focused on, I told you that it's about production factors. So when we have enormous supply of something, raw materials especially, labor especially, and cheap labor, if it is cheap, say for example, the Bangladeshi apparel sector. So we can do, using this absolute advantage, we can produce huge amount of some products or services, and by serving our local demand, we can export this to other countries. But there is another situation. Okay, maybe for two countries, if the situation, because it is about export and import, so considering two countries, one country can be comparatively inefficient in producing something. In Bengali, we can say this as Mondir Bhalo. Mondir Bhalo. So now I call Tahmid Aziz Choudhury to say something about this Mondir Bhalo or comparative advantage of trade theories developed by David Ricardo. Well, Tahmid Aziz Choudhury. Tahmid Aziz, your microphone.
Miss, can you hear me?
Yes, now it's okay.
Okay, cool. Good evening, everyone. So today I'm going to discuss the comparative advantage theory. The comparative advantage theory was put forward by David Ricardo following the analysis that was put forward by Adam Smith in his earlier times. The Adam Smith's theory of absolute advantage, like the previous speakers and Miss has explained very clearly, was based on total cost, whereas the the Ricardian theory of comparative advantage, was based on opportunity cost. So, firstly, David Ricardo, who lived between 1772 and 1823, was a classical economist who developed several key theories that remain influential in economics till date. The Ricardian theory of comparative advantage refutes the absolute advantage theory, where the absolute advantage assumes only two economies and two goods being produced and traded between themselves. This means that the theory couldn't hold ground when you consider multiple economies trading between themselves and when there are multiple commodities involved. Secondly, the theory couldn't consider the protectionist side of the matter, where countries usually adopted higher levels of protectionism. So David Ricardo came up with a solution to this problem. He, in his book, The Principles of Political Economy and Taxation, denounced absolute advantage and suggested comparative advantage theory. The comparative advantage theory argues that countries can benefit from international trade by specializing in the production of goods on which they have relative lower opportunity costs. Now, this is the total contrast of Adam Smith's theory, where he talked about the total cost, whereas David Ricardo talks about the relative opportunity cost of producing a particular product. So the lower opportunity cost in producing, even if there is no particular absolute advantage in the production of a particular good. For example, if we consider two economies, let's say China and the United Kingdom, uh, mutual trade would benefit both economies if China and the United Kingdom specialize. China specializes on the production of, let's say, tea, and the United Kingdom concentrates and focuses on the production of machinery. So since these economies, China has lower opportunity costs in the production of tea, and United Kingdom has lower opportunity costs on the production of machineries. Although these economies might not have absolute advantage in the production of these goods, because of the opportunity cost they enjoy, they should produce and trade between themselves. So this was David Ricardo's theory. Uh, Now we need to discuss some of the criticisms of the theory because given this current situation and multiple trade theories that followed afterwards, some of the assumptions that were made on the basis of comparative advantage did not hold ground. So the criticisms are, firstly, the theory assumes only labor cost and no other cost. In the assumption, the theory assumes that labor cost is the only factor cost that needs to be accounted for. And the other problem is that labor is homogeneous in nature, which means that all labor act and produce output in similar manner. Secondly, costs are considered to be constant, which means that there are no fluctuations in the cost. Now, given the global pandemic that we are facing right now, we can say that costs are in no way constant. And even if we talk about a normal situation, costs are generally never constant. Moving on, the theory does not consider states like global crisis, military regulations, environmental disasters. It also does not consider protectionist measures that are usually adopted by most countries. And finally, the most important point is the Ricardian theory fails to hold ground in a global pandemic situation such as the one we are currently facing. This is because the theory does not account for a downright breach of global supply chain that has become a normal phenomenon in the world that we are living in right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tamid Aziz. So we have discussed three theories here about trade. We have some other issues, some other theories, especially the investment theories. Okay, so I think we have Faizan here to say something about investment theories, especially monopolistic advantage or dynamic capability, and number three, internalization. So based on the pandemic situation, if Faizan is here, he can tell us something about these theories. Faizan, are you here? Who is there? There is one fifth person here. Who is that?
Miss.
Yes.
Miss Minha.
Yes. Your name?
Yes, Minhazul Alam, miss.
Okay, Minhazul Alam. Can you tell us something about the investment theories, monopolistic or internalization and dynamic capabilities?
If we can say about the investment theory, based on investment theory, the theorist actually said that if you want to invest on some the theory is actually based on the country. If anyone would like to invest on some country, then you
Where is Minhaz? I think his internet or electricity, some interruption he has got by this time. Okay, so before starting the future trend of trade, government, and economy, let's say something about the investment. Well, monopolistic advantage is one thing when the multinational companies, the multinational enterprise got such ability that they can make profit from abroad better from that of the local company, because by this time they have achieved their economies of scale, they have enough knowledge, they have very good network, they have their expertise, and based on this thing they can achieve production at a very low cost, And because of low cost, because of efficiency, because of diversification, and because of differentiation, they can make good profit from many countries. And it is the way they use their dynamic capability and they do the internalization. And here the internalization is that multinational company or global company, they make their subsidiary abroad, and based on their expertise, they transfer their expertise to their subsidiary abroad so that they can make better profit, they can make good product, quality product at a very low price, and based on dynamic capability, they can do this over time. So this is the investment rules. And there is also eclectic theory of international production. There it says about location specific, it says about the facilities of ownership specific, and also the expertise of the to be used in the subsidiary from home country. So these sort of facilities a multinational company can use when globalization exists. But the scenario is now the globalization with its loss of criticism. Globalization is in its declining phase. We adopted globalization after globalization. But now, because of the pandemic, because of the transportation shutdown, because of the shutdown of exchange of goods, because of the production shutdown, this sort of occurrence, what is happening? We need to focus on localization. As I mentioned earlier about the diamond theory of authors, I mentioned about one factor, production factor. And there is another very important factor, that is the demand condition. For any industry, any, we can make example Bangladesh apparels. Here, if you consider demand condition, actually it's close to zero, because this production, this knitwear, this oven, not for the use of Bangladeshi people, because the material they use, the tesuti they use, the design, the pattern they use, everything is completely for the European countries, the developed countries, because we know we export this to the USA, to UK, to Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Mostly our garments goes to there. So the demand condition is, as I say, is close to zero. And we need to focus on localization. We need to focus on selling it locally. And now we are in trouble because the production, the apparel we produce is only to export. So when the situation based on the pandemic, many things needed to change its direction. Same thing for trade, international trade. So we need to think about something very new, something very just, something very ecological, because this pandemic, we cannot say this is some scientific, this is maybe something environmental. It's not like climate change, but climate change also, we can say, caused by the society, the human being. And maybe based on some assumption, this virus came from some wild animals. And maybe this is also caused by the society, the human being. Though our discussion is not for reasoning out the viruses, we needed to focus on what should be the pattern, the economic pattern, the trade pattern we are going to adapt for the benefit of our future. We need to be just to the environment, we need to be just to our society, and we need to be just to the people and the planet. Well, so now our discussion will be to some future trends of trade pattern. And for this, I'm very first inviting Mukta Akhtar again to say something about her part. It's, I think it's capitalism, right, Mukta? Capitalism,
Yes, ma'am,
state
that's
capitalism.
capitalism. Yeah, when we try to look at the alternatives of these trade theories, one of the idea came in front of us was is state capitalism that was discussed by Simon Meyer, one of the economic researcher, in his research publication for the conversation. What he mentioned here is that state capitalism has been showing a dominant response across the world right now. Uh, the concept is that the society considers the exchange value as guidance of the economy, and it also recognizes that a country, a citizens needs support from its state when there is a crisis like pandemic, especially when workers will not be able to go to the work. So whenever there is a crisis, state will ensure extended level of welfare activities for at least a minimum period of time, and with the motive to allow as many local businesses as possible to keep trading with the support of the government and the policies by the government. This will actually help to grow the economy more with the support of the government. Also, uh, when we see that world is moving towards decentralization, after this pandemic finishes, we may look at some of the changes in the trade patterns. We may see some new trade barriers or renewed trade agreement between countries. So this can be one of the options to look forward to cope up with the new world order after post-pandemic situation. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mukta. It's capitalism here. We are actually telling our government to be owner of the industry. So I think the industry by this should be more restricted, more controlled, and we hope that it should also be profitable and the people will be benefited by this because there will be the organized structure if we adopt social, state capitalism. Okay, so now there is another thing, a little bit weird and something without a standard but intellectual standard, decent barbarism. So I like to invite Esha Mahmood to say something about these theories, how to be useful for our pandemic situation, for future trend.
So when we are going to, is there any way or any alternative of trade pattern that we can follow after this pandemic situation? So we have found on an article that name is "What Will Be the World After the Coronavirus." So we have got this idea of barbarism from that article, and we have named that barbarism trade theory. So question may arise why we named it barbarism. So that's because if government continue to supervise or regulate everything solely and refuse to decentralize the market mechanism, it may lead to shut down many private businesses and markets may face many crises. And it also lead to political and social devastation. So, therefore, in this theory, we try to overcome this barbaric situation where government has to decentralize its regulation and let the market mechanism also to decide how to do the trade successfully. So the reason of behind to develop this theory is that each economy has to give priority to protect its own social value as well as their citizens first. So, based on their strong basis, they can have the ability to fight solely against this crisis rather than depend on another country. So, we can say that each country individually has to be strong not only locally but also globally, and it can help them to able to achieve the sustainable development goals. So that's all about from my part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yasha Mahmood. As you have said something about sustainable development goals, and it's very related to the government initiative. Well, the situation is that the government now should take their responsibility so that they can do the utmost good to the people, because of the globalization, it was upon the global companies, the corporate. But if the government adopts something, well, a bit Marxism theories, and this time the government shouldn't be the owner of the industries, of the corporate or of the companies, but this time they can have good control over the companies or the corporate for the benefit of the people. So now I'd like to invite Amit Aziz to say something about social capitalism. Amit Aziz.
So, as we have discussed earlier, that all the trade theories that we have like the comparative advantage and the absolute advantage, mercantilism, and how these theories are not holding up during this ongoing pandemic. We have looked at some other theories such as social capitalism, and now we're going to look at state socialism, which advocates for government control over means of production as a precondition for established socialism. So what is state socialism at the very essence of it? Like socialism argues that the resources that are used to produce goods and services should be under the control of the government so that they can ensure that there are equal dispersion of all the resources that are available in the economy for all the citizens of the nation, and also ensure in the process of doing so that there are no excludable factors and no individual in the economy gets excluded from it. So state socialism is an advocate of means of production which with the precondition that they consider the state should own the resources and centralize all the decision making. State socialism was first put forward by Karl Marx, and they talk about centralized response, prioritizing the protection of life. The theory also ensures that the government take measures and protect that with what is essential for the living. For instance, food, energy, and shelter, and basic commodities. The state may nationalize these resources and provide housing facilities to all its citizens. Government must encourage people to produce goods and services such as agricultural products rather than depending on other countries. Now, given the current situation that we are going through, we have seen a major breach in the supply chain, and therefore we cannot depend on foreign goods and services that we used to depend on previously. And as the previous speakers have mentioned illustriously, that globalization as we came to know of it is no longer functioning at the moment. Now, in this current state where WTO reports that most countries have banned or placed multiple protectionist measures to ensure that domestic goods and services are not sold out to the international market before meeting the domestic demand. So, in the process of doing so, we furthermore discussed that when we observe the obliteration of the supply chain, we can't help but support this inward facing or localization idea from economic behavior to ensure sustenance of our economy. This new trade theory, the state socialism, points out how it is no longer possible to depend on other countries for staple goods and services, and sooner individual economies can localize the production of these goods and services, the better off they will be. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tahmid. So it's a good discussion actually about social capitalism related to Marxism. It's actually we are for the society. We the people, we the government, we the corporate. And that's why there is another subject matter, evolve corporate social responsibility. Well, you know, in our religion, in Islam, when we are capable enough, especially we are financially capable, we are to donate people. Donation in many forms. Donation in zakat, donation in fitra, and to give donate to different relief funds, and sometimes donating to many people, neighbor, poor relatives, or the beggar in the street. It is when we are financially capable. And when the corporate social responsibility evolved, okay, many criticize that the company or global company or M&E, I mean, they are not charitable discussion. Why should they donate? Well, they should donate because they are capable. That's why now they can do something for the society. And we know that great power brings great responsibility. And that's why we see in the corporate world, my Facebook and Mexican Telecom, and many other corporate giants. They are donating, they are giving to the society. So here, from the same article, as mentioned by Mukta Simon Maher, there is a fourth trend, future trend, that is mutual benefit, mutual aid. So now, this is the time with the people to work for others, with the political participants to work for the people. So in the mutual aid trend or mutual aid pattern, here the people and political participants, they reciprocally exchange resources and services. And what happened in Ebola situation, it was based on the community response. Community, because if you consider the population of Bangladesh, it's almost 17 crore. Well, so we know that we have just entered into the developing countries status. It is very tough for the government to cover up the total health sector for this very big population. So thing is, we the corporate, we the institution, we the local people, we the local community, even the schools, the mosques, the church, whatever, everybody, every institute, now they eagerly start working for the society, because this moment we very need each other, for each other, to protect ourselves from this pandemic situation. So while we do need profit, but we do need to live. We do need to live in this planet. We do need to save this planet. So we can follow these mutual aid theories. Business can do business for the society, for their product, of course, for profit, for the people, and also for the planet. And when everybody, every institutions, every organizations, they can adopt such thing in their mission statement, in their values, in their ideology, that time they can do real great for the people and for the society. So both way now, we can make benefit for ourselves. Nowadays, we see that people, based on the pandemic and also for the social media, people are more aware about what government is doing and what government should do. So, as we say about mutual aid, it is about the reciprocity in between the people and political participants. And same way we see that people are more aware about the dues and deeds of political participants of the government, especially for Bangladesh. So we find some positivity for the political participant, for politics, and for the government. We can see that people are still have their faith to the government, to the political participant. So this is time for the political participants to change their direction, to do real good for the society. And I think this is the high time for people to respond positively, and very high time for the political participant to start doing real good for the society, and thus we can achieve our sustainable development goals. Okay, so I'm finishing this discussion because though we are a bit late in starting the stream, but as we have finished our discussion within our time, so we can conclude it now by thanking our MBA students, and they're also job holder. They work in different multinational companies. So Mukta Akhtar, Isha Mahmood, and Tahmiz Aziz. Okay, I'm very proud being their faculty of North-South University, because they're really smart in participating this sort of discussion. Okay, I also thank Relight Research because they have provided us their platform to make this streaming successful. And I also thank Infomi to be our technical partner to make this event smooth streaming in Facebook and in other social media. So viewers, thank you that you have been with us to take part in this discussion. If you have any question, it's open, and we will put it in our Relight Research or other pages so that you can see it later. So make your comments. We will try to address your comments or your questions. And you like or follow our Relight Research page and our InfoMe page and be with us. We hope to see you in future with more live discussion, with more concurrent issue. Thank you so much. Thank you. Khuda Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.